2016 is kicked off in the United States of America in Las Vegas, Nevada. IT News Africa is present at Synergy 2016 to interview the highly influential execs from Citrix. I'm Daryl Linnington, online editor for IT News Africa. Let's meet the execs.
Hi, my name is Florin Lazurca. I'm a senior manager for technical marketing for security at Citrix. So I work with customers and work with the executives at our briefings and our messaging around security and Citrix. Now, when we look at our customers, some of the use cases they look at for Citrix and security are around enabling workforce productivity, and workforce continuity. So when we're looking at whether it's riots or social unrest, whether it's climate, whether it's a pandemic or flu, anytime your workforce has to be able to still be productive but not in the office physically, that's part of the workforce continuity. Protecting confidential data, so data that is proprietary, data that is intellectual property, sensitive or classified data. It's not living on endpoints, it's in the data center. So it's protected by the sheer fact that it's no longer existing or living on endpoints. The other one is just providing improving compliance. So whether it's PCI compliance, whether it's FISMA compliance or HIPAA compliance, having applications and the data that are in a data center that are properly managed, they're configured, patch management is consistent, the data is no longer moving outside of the boundaries of the data center, outside of the perimeter. That's huge for limiting the scope of an audit and making the audit faster. We're looking at providing access, protected access, remote access for your vendors, for your partners, for your contractors, whether it's offshoring and outsourcing, any third-party access. You give them the access to the applications they need and the data they need to actually work with for your company. So that's compliance, continuity, third-party access, and the confidential data are probably the top 4 or 5 use cases that we see. So what we're doing is we're moving from an architecture that's endpoint dependent, so where your applications and your data live on endpoints. An example is you may have a clinic or a lot of branches where endpoints are where the data is entered. If that endpoint fails or if that endpoint is stolen or lost, you lose access to data. You may lose confidential patient data, you might lose confidential information like credit card numbers and so forth. So we keep that off of the endpoints, keep it in the data center. The customer can take advantage of the already existing security investment they've made. So the firewalls, network firewalls, the IPS and the IDS, the data loss prevention solutions they've already purchased. They don't have to replicate that on every endpoint out there. So when we look at security in general, so security architecture, there's like 5 pillars that we focus on. One is identity and access. So how do you limit access? How do you control access? How do you audit access to your applications and data? Two-factor authentication, group membership. So you present to the end user the portal or the login page. They have to log in. You can audit and monitor that. You can grant or deny access to applications based on the location they're connecting from. Perhaps they need to access an HR application. But you can say this HR application is available when you're internal to the network, or when you're working from home on an unmanaged device, you do not get access to this application. Or maybe it's a time of day situation where normally you should not have access to this application when it's midnight, for example. So access to the application is disabled at certain times of day. So once the identity of the end user is determined, we determine that credentials are valid, the end user opens the application, all that traffic, all that stream traffic between the endpoint and the data center is encrypted. The only thing that is streamed over is the screen updates, the pixels, the sound, the video. The data itself does not leave the data center. And then you can, at that point, have your additional firewalls that are in place, blocking off all the other access that's required or requested. You're basically opening up a small pinpoint into your network, into your applications, instead of leaving it wide open. So as mentioned before, your applications and your data are centralized. That's huge. I don't think people understand the full breadth of that. Is application management is no longer done on thousands of endpoints. Application configuration is consistent. All the checkboxes, all the scripts that need to run are done one time in the data center and not on every endpoint. So if that endpoint is lost, you can replace it. You can be up and running within minutes instead of having to rebuild, run GPOs, reinstall the operating system, re-image the operating system, install applications, make sure they're properly configured. That endpoint is basically taken out of the equation, so you can replace it with any sort of endpoint that you want, whether it's a BYO type of scenario where the end user chooses their endpoint, or whether it's a thin client that can sit behind a monitor and get access to the applications they need. The data as well. So when you're looking at some of the threats that are out there, huge threats are around ransomware. Ransomware on an endpoint that has all the data, you're pretty much stuck. You have to either pay for the ransom and hope that you get your data back, or you lost your data. Keep the data in the data center. You can back it up properly. You can have multiple volumes, shadow copies, multiple versions of the data. You can segment the network to prevent ransomware from going from one network to the other network. Limit which drives are shared, so that an endpoint or Windows desktop, for example, in the data center doesn't have access to every shared drive in the network as well. So you can do a lot of protection of the data when it's centrally located, especially around data loss prevention. So someone sends a file they shouldn't have access to. For example, I send you a file with share files IRM now. The system can determine Daryl's not supposed to open this file. It's only access is granted to Florin. So you can limit, audit, control access to files. With share file, for example, I can send you an attachment. Your attachment, your file, your audit, or whatever, it does not sit in your Exchange server. It doesn't sit in your email system. If someone gets access to your email system, they don't get access to the file, because the only thing that's in your email system is a link to the file that may exist in the cloud or on premises in your storage. So at that point, you're moving away from using your mailbox as a storage system for your sensitive documents, which unfortunately a lot of people still do. So you have your data controlled and audited, who accesses it, and so forth. So in terms of top threats, I think some of the data breach reports out there, for example, the Verizon data breach report, investigations report, had stolen credentials. Valid credentials are one of the top attack methods out there. So how do you counteract that? The easiest way is two-factor authentication. So in terms of top threats, recently ransomware has been in the headlines a lot. So whether it's healthcare systems or finance systems as well. Ransomware affects endpoints. It used to be a consumer type of problem. It used to be something, you got your personal pictures got encrypted. Now you pay the ransom. It's moved and it's migrated into the enterprise, into businesses, where now a whole network can be locked out. Your operations is down. How much does it cost the organization to be down every day by day because you may lose access to your network? So with ransomware, let's take a look at some of the threat vectors out there. A lot of it is email. Right? So you might get sent a link in your email. You might get sent, it's a type of phishing type of scenario where you open an attachment in the email that encrypts your system, encrypts your hard drive, encrypts all your personal files, encrypts your enterprise files. So how do you control against that? You can say, well, I can do it at the endpoint level. I can make sure that the user doesn't click on links in their email, doesn't open attachments that they don't trust, that they don't know. So part of it is end user education, or you can do it at the enterprise level. You can do it have the architecture built so you don't run active content. So you open up Outlook, It will automatically filter out attachments that have certain extensions to it. It will automatically scan the body of the email to get rid of links that look suspicious, so they go to a whitelist, blacklist type of scenario. So you're centralizing that functionality in the data center. So ransomware is huge. There's different ways to address it. One of them is having a browser, like say you're publishing a browser, web browser, that is locked down. It doesn't run anything. It doesn't run Flash. It doesn't run any active content, for example, that may be prone to ransomware. And at that point, it's that version of the browser is set to do one specific thing. Maybe it runs the web portal for your HR system, and you don't want that browser to be able to get infected at all, or that session to get infected. Then you go to the next browser, and maybe it's a slightly more open browser, and you can do more things with it. But those browsers never talk to each other. These systems that those browsers are published on are in different segments. The data is on different segments. They never talk to each other. So that way you can segment your applications. So that's one way to address ransomware. The other one was around credential harvesting and credential theft. According to some of the new, the most recent data breach reports, stolen credentials are amongst the top threat vectors out there. So people tend to use similar credentials because they have hundreds of passwords that they have to manage, tens, hundreds, or more, and they tend to reuse the same passwords. So there's databases, on sale of usernames and passwords. So if you use your same email and password on a personal site, and then use it in your corporate network, it's possible that someone can have access to your corporate email, for example. So an easy example of a control against that is having two-factor authentication. Having one password and that's static, that changes maybe 30, 60, 90 days, and having another password that changes every 30, 60, 90 seconds. Or maybe it's a one-time use type of password, or it's a biometric type of scenario where it needs another form factor to prove that it's you instead of just one single factor. And unfortunately, that's probably one of the biggest ways that people gain access to networks is by stolen credentials, and stolen credentials that give access. That's one form of passwords that just give easy access. So it's like you built this huge castle and with a moat, which you're giving the keys to let people walk into your door. The other one is around stolen credentials, ransomware, and just lost devices, right? So people lose devices, stolen devices, any devices that have sensitive data on them. That's actually one of the top ones as well. So you can lose your device in a cab. It's unencrypted. It may have sensitive data on there. Now it's available for whoever steals it takes it to be able to sell it as well. In terms of the value that Citrix provides in terms of security, it's a security architecture. So from the ground up, we address some of the fundamentals of security: two-factor authentication, segmentation of the network, keeping your data off of the endpoints, keeping your data secure, keeping your applications and operating systems patched centrally and configured centrally more efficiently. So think of the benefits to IT efficiency that Citrix provides, and that translates into security efficiency as well. So identity and access, how do we identify who's connecting? Once they're connected, how do we control what they have access to, give them the appropriate amount of access? Once they get access to their application, making sure that that application is not vulnerable, whether it's a web application, a Windows application, a desktop, a Windows desktop, a Linux desktop, whether it's applications that live natively on mobile devices. So for Android, iOS, Windows devices, we're looking at the data and the app live natively on that device. Well, in that case, we containerize the application, we encrypt the data around it, and we control what applications speak to what applications. So you have, across the whole breadth of applications, Windows, web, and mobile devices, you control the access to, and you are able to, at that point, control some of the functionality that would get people in trouble, as well as make it protected against some of the attacks that are very common out there. So in conclusion, when you're looking at a Citrix architecture, there's security fundamentals that are added, that are built into the architecture, that actually by design will make your infrastructure more secure. My name is Florin Lazurca. I'm a Senior Technical Marketing Manager for Security at Citrix. Thank you.